Joseph stood on the warm tile of his daughter's lanai, the scent of plumeria drifting on the trade wind as the turquoise waves crashed softly against the lava rock below. He held his old leather suitcase, the one he and his wife had bought in Honolulu decades ago, against his hip, breathing in the salty air and steadying his heart. His daughter's voice, cold and sharp, still rang in his ears. "You will either serve my husband all day or get out of my house." She had expected him to argue, to yell, to beg, or to collapse in tears. But Joseph only smiled, a quiet, confident smile that drew a curious glance from his son-in-law, Kai, who sat slouched in the wicker chair by the sliding glass door, eyes fixed on the football game playing on the flat-screen TV. Joseph set the suitcase down gently and laid the brown paper bag of groceries on the polished bamboo counter. Ripe mangoes, coconut milk, sweet local bananas, bought with the last of his savings. He thought of his late wife, of how she used to laugh at his careful way of placing each mango so its curve faced outward. A small act of love. At 35, Kai was big and loud, with broad shoulders and a belly he jutted forward as if daring the world to push him around. He looked at Joseph without surprise, reached for a chilled lager from the mini-fridge, and raised it in a lazy salute. "Get me a beer, Pop," he demanded, without pausing the commentary on the screen. Joseph opened the fridge and found 2 local craft brews, one pale ale, one dark porter, labeled carefully in his mind as his daughter's favorites. He had carried them across the islands with her in mind. Kai grunted and threw back the dark one, only to place it with a thud among the other empties in the bin beneath the counter. "Not that crap," he said. Joseph's smile widened. He set the pale ale on the counter and, in a voice as calm as the seas at dawn, said, "I bought these for us all to share." Kai rolled his eyes and swatted the bottle aside. "Whatever. You're here to serve. Do what you're told or leave." His daughter, standing behind him in a sundress too tight at the waist, arms crossed and foot tapping in a half-circle of impatience, watched him with the same entitled stare he'd seen too often during family gatherings, always waiting for him to break. Joseph looked at her, then at the ocean beyond her shoulder, and saw the promise of freedom on the horizon. He took a deep breath, unbuckled his belt, and with deliberate care opened his suitcase. Inside, folded neatly in thin layers of tissue paper, were 3 short-sleeved shirts, a pair of well-worn slacks, his prescription bottles, reading glasses in a leather case, and importantly, a small framed photo of his wife smiling beneath a rainbow at Hanama Bay. He pulled the photo free, pressed his lips to the glass, and whispered, "This is where my life began, and here's where it continues." He tucked the frame into his jacket pocket. His daughter's jaw dropped, and Kai froze mid-cheer for a long pass. Joseph closed the suitcase with a soft click, lifted it in one smooth motion, and walked toward the front door without another word. He paused there, the sun painting his silver hair gold, and turned back to look at them. He saw shock, confusion, perhaps a hint of fear. He nodded once, with kindness he no longer needed to ask for, then stepped down onto the stone path, leaving the groceries and the open coaster where his beer had sat. As he walked across the lawn toward his old Buick parked under a plumeria tree, he felt the gentle give of tropical soil beneath his shoes and the reassuring hum of engine as he opened the door. Inside, the seat still held the faint scent of his wife's jasmine perfume. He closed the door, touched the photograph in his pocket, and whispered, "They will regret underestimating me." Driving away, he watched their house grow smaller against the backdrop of swaying palms, and with each mile he felt lighter, unburdened by their demands. The salty breeze through the open window carried the promise of new beginnings. A small room in a modest Lahaina motel, a carefully planned sequence of phone calls to banks and collection agencies, that the slow but certain unraveling of every automatic payment he had once set up for their comfort. As the highway curved along the coastline, Joseph thought of the lava fields that formed new land after fiery eruptions. He thought of how islands rose from destruction, new life formed from hardship. And he knew that, like those islands, he would rebuild something stronger, purer, and entirely his own. Joseph checked into a small motel on the edge of Lahaina just as the sun sank behind the West Maui Mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded him of the Hawaiian sunsets he and his late wife used to watch together. He carried his leather suitcase down the narrow corridor to room 13, its door bearing the faint stain of past tenants and the faint scent of air freshener. Inside, the room was basic: a bed, a tiny desk, a rickety chair, and a sliding glass door that opened to a view of palm fronds swaying above a rusted sign that read, "Seaside Inn." Joseph unpacked methodically, placing 3 neatly folded shirts on the bed, setting his prescription bottles on the nightstand, and tucking the framed photo of his wife into the small safe in the closet. He snapped the safe shut, the click echoing in the small room like the closing of a chapter in his life. Climbing onto the bed, he opened his laptop and connected it to the motel's weak Wi-Fi signal, then logged into his bank account with hands that trembled only slightly. For 5 years, ever since his daughter and Kai had decided to move to Maui, he had set up automatic payments on his checking account for their mortgage, their car insurance, their utilities, and even their grocery bills. He had removed any thought of saving for himself because he believed in family. Now, with a few clicks, he navigated to the mortgage lender's portal and canceled the automatic payment for their house on Kanoa Street, which he still owned in name and in law. He deleted the beneficiaries on his insurance policies, removed Kai's truck and his daughter's SUV from his car insurance plan, and took them off his credit cards as authorized users. Every time he confirmed a cancellation, the screen showed him a confirmation number, a digital seal of his freedom. He printed each confirmation on paper from the motel's tiny business center and slipped the pages into a manila folder labeled Evidence. As midnight approached, his phone buzzed with 22 missed calls, most from unknown numbers, but several clearly labeled Home or Office. He scrolled through them without opening any, then deleted the lot in one motion, feeling nothing but a faint satisfaction that his plan was working. Outside, the ocean crashed against the shore in steady, soothing rhythms. Inside, Joseph felt the weight of years of unspoken resentment and quiet sacrifice lifting from his shoulders. He stretched his legs and went into the bathroom to look at himself in the mirror. Silver hair, lined face, eyes that still held a spark of determination. He pressed a finger to the doorframe and whispered, "They will regret underestimating me." Then, he made 2 more calls, one to the title company handling the deed to the Kanoa Street property, where he quietly appended a clause granting him the right to reclaim full ownership if he ever chose to withdraw support. A secret his wife and his attorney had approved, but his daughter had never known. And another to the Veterans Housing Authority to express his wish to donate that house to veterans in need, turning the dream of a family home into transitional housing for those who served this country. He ended the calls and leaned back on the bed, the soft hum of the air conditioner the only sound in the room. He pulled out the manila folder and reviewed his evidence. Bank statements, email confirmations, screenshots of account changes, and legal papers that traced every dollar he had given his daughter and Kai. Each sheet told a story of kindness repaid with entitlement, and he felt a cold clarity settle in his chest. Tomorrow, he would drive east to Hilo to file an official eviction notice at the courthouse, serving Kai and his daughter with a 30-day order to vacate the property he had paid for with his life's work. And on Sunday morning, when his daughter stood at the podium in her church to testify, he would have already sent a letter to the Maui News editor detailing the exact sums. $160,000 for her college education, $25,000 for her wedding, $30,000 for home renovations, and thousands more for utilities and groceries. He imagined how each figure would land in the quiet sanctuary, how the congregation would murmur as they realized how much they had misjudged him. He turned off the lamp and lay down, pushing the manila folder under his pillow, the photo of his wife still safe in the closet. As he drifted to sleep, the gentle sound of waves outside reminded him that islands rose from explosions of lava, new land born of destruction and rebirth. In the same way, he would rebuild his life from the ashes of betrayal, forging a new path stronger and purer than before. And when the dawn came, it would mark the beginning of his carefully crafted revenge, hidden until the moment it struck with the force of a Pacific storm. Joseph woke before dawn, the sky still dark and heavy with clouds, and packed his manila folder and suitcase into the trunk of his old Chevy Impala. He drove east along the Hana Highway, the headlights cutting through misty palm groves and the occasional rain shower that kissed the mist-laden windshield. He thought of his wife's gentle laughter as they drove this same road together, her hand warm in his, and the ache of memory spurred him on. By mid-morning, he arrived at the Hilo County Courthouse, a red brick building framed by tropical gardens, where he carried the eviction notice and property deed to the clerk's window. He watched as the clerk stamped his documents, eviction notice, 30-day possession, and felt a quiet thrill at the official seal. He provided proof that he was the sole legal owner of the Kanoa Street home, signed every form with his steady hand, and paid the filing fee from his own account. He left the courthouse with copies of the notice that would be served to his daughter and Kai within 48 hours. Next, he stopped by the local title company office to confirm that the clause he had secretly added to the deed, granting him the right to reclaim full ownership if he ever ceased financial support, was legally binding. The title agent nodded as she reviewed the notarized amendment, her expression respectful. Joseph walked out knowing that should they contest, the courts would recognize his claim. He drove to a quiet cafe on Banyan Drive, seated himself at a corner table, and pulled up his email drafts on the laptop. He edited the letter to the Maui News editor, adding precise figures. $160,000 for his daughter's law school tuition at the University of Hawaii, $25,000 for her wedding ceremony in Hana, $10,000 for the honeymoon her husband had barely mentioned. He wrote about the $30,000 in home improvements he had funded, new hurricane-proof windows, a solar water heater, the stone tile flooring that gleamed in the living room, and how Kai had used the house as collateral when he forged loan documents in a failed attempt to steal equity through a shady home equity application. Joseph described how he had caught the forged application when his friend Bob at First National flagged it, revealing Kai's plan to steal the home by filing fraudulent paperwork, and he included a copy of the bank's rejection letter as an attachment. He grew more precise as he wrote, detailing how, upon his discovery of Kai's gambling debts, nearly $20,000 owed to multiple creditors, including one unregistered loan shark, he began watching for signs of desperation. He explained how Kai's demand that Joseph serve him drinks and meals on command was never about respect, but about control, keeping Joseph underfoot so he could quietly draw funds from his Social Security checks and retirement accounts. Joseph closed the draft and scheduled it to send on Sunday morning at 9 a.m., knowing that as his daughter faced the congregation, the news editor's desk would already have her letter. He then drafted a Facebook post for his personal account, public to all his connections, laying out the same facts in plain language, so there could be no misunderstanding. The $160,000 tuition, the $25,000 wedding, the $30,000 renovations, the forgery, the mortgage cancellation, and the plan to donate the house to the Veterans Housing Initiative. He previewed the post, pausing at the final line. "This home will serve veterans who understand sacrifice and honor, something I taught my family with my life, but that they chose not to respect." He scheduled the post for 10 a.m., precisely 10 minutes after his daughter delivered her apology and admissions during church service. Feeling satisfied, he closed his laptop and left the cafe, stopping next at the Pacific Collection Agency on Kamehameha Avenue. He spoke to Marcus Webb, the manager, explained that Harry Thompson, Kai's legal name, no longer resided at Kanoa Street and had no claim to the property. He provided the eviction notice and urged Webb to update his records, specifying the new address for any further inquiries. He made similar calls to 3 other collection agencies, each time correcting Kai's false claim of residency, ensuring that creditors who once came to Joseph's home would soon go nowhere. By late afternoon, Joseph returned to the Seaside Inn and retrieved his photo of his wife from the safe, tucking it back into his jacket pocket. He sat on the small balcony overlooking the sea and thumbed through his manila folder one more time. Eviction notices, deed amendment, bank statements, title confirmation, collection agency confirmations, and printed emails of his Sunday letter. He closed the folder and placed it in his suitcase with a sense of finality. Outside, the wind carried the faint scent of rain, and he smiled, thinking of how islands emerged from volcanic destruction, new land formed through fire and hardship. His own life had shifted similarly, from burning sacrifice to a firm, rising foundation. He felt the calm resolve settle in his chest. 4 days remained until his daughter's church testimony. 4 days until the letter and Facebook post went live. 4 days until the Veterans Housing Authority prepared to accept the deed. In those 4 days, he planned to observe, to wait, and to let his hidden bombshells detonate in their time. The shock of eviction, the revelation of forgery, the public apology, the donation of the family home. As twilight descended, Joseph folded his hands on his lap and watched the ocean waves shimmer under the moonlight. He whispered to the sea breeze, "This is only the beginning." Sunday dawned clear and bright, the air filled with the scent of plumeria and the gentle hum of church bells echoing across the valley as Joseph parked his Chevy Impala under the sprawling banyan tree by Kihei Community Church, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark slacks, the same outfit he had worn to his daughter's wedding years ago. He carried only his manila folder, his laptop bag, and the framed photograph of his late wife tucked safely inside his jacket pocket. He strode through the polished wooden doors, just as Pastor Calais Williams welcomed the congregation, and he slid into a rear pew, taking in the faces of neighbors, friends of the family, and tourists who had wandered in for the aloha spirit. The sanctuary felt both intimate and vast, the high ceilings echoing the faint rustle of hymnals as the choir sang, "Ke anoho mai kai," their voices soaring like birds over the Pacific. Joseph watched as his daughter, Leilani, sat in the front row beside Kai, her posture stiff, her eyes fixed on the pulpit as she clutched a stack of papers. He felt no malice, only a deep curiosity to see how she would navigate the moment he had engineered. When Pastor Williams announced testimonies, a hush fell over the crowd. Leilani rose, smoothing her sundress as if to iron out the trembling in her voice. Joseph watched her take measured steps toward the lectern, the polished wood gleaming under the tropical sunlight that streamed through stained glass windows of hibiscus and sea turtles. She placed her notes on the stand, drew a shuddering breath, and began. "Aloha, everyone. I have to share something about my father, Joseph Miller, and the decisions he made for our family." At that precise moment, Joseph's email to the Maui news editor was delivered, and his Facebook post went live, triggering a buzz among the attendees who glanced at their smartphones with widening eyes. Leilani continued, her voice gaining strength as she read aloud the exact figures he had placed in his letter. "Over the past 5 years, my father paid $160,000 for my law school tuition. He covered $25,000 for my wedding in Hana. He funded $30,000 in renovations to our beachfront home, including hurricane windows and solar water heating. And he provided more than $40,000 in monthly living expenses when Kai and I struggled to make ends meet." Gasps rippled through the congregation, and Joseph felt a quiet satisfaction as murmurs rose like warm trade winds. Leilani paused to gather herself, her eyes glistening with tears, as she revealed how, 3 weeks ago, when her father refused to serve Kai's every whim, she and Kai gave him an ultimatum. "Obey my husband's commands, or pack your suitcase and leave your own house." A collective intake of breath seemed to shake the rafters, and Joseph reached into his pocket to confirm the time, 9:07 a.m., just 2 minutes after his schedule. Leilani spoke of the forged home equity application that Kai had submitted in his father-in-law's name, the bank's rejection notice, and the discovery of $20,000 in gambling debts at the Hilo Casino. She disclosed how her father had quietly rescued them from those debts until he realized they would never be repaid. When Dad left, she said, her voice cracking, he did so with dignity rather than submit to shame. She looked out at Joseph, who sat unmoving, the photo of his wife peeking from his inner pocket, and said, "I'm sorry I asked you to choose between your dignity and our demands. I'm here to make amends, to honor the sacrifices you made, and to rebuild our relationship on truth, not entitlement." Tears streamed down her cheeks as the congregation rose in unison, a standing ovation that filled the church with the warmth of forgiveness and aloha. Joseph stood as well, feeling the snap of every eye upon him, and nodded gently toward his daughter, offering her the gift of his understanding. Outside, friends and neighbors embraced Leilani and Kai, many stopping to shake Joseph's hand, expressing shock at Kai's deception and gratitude for Joseph's integrity. As the church emptied, Joseph stepped onto the sun-warmed stone steps and glanced at his phone. Dozens of new messages from readers praising his letter, dozens of social media posts sharing his Facebook confession, and an email from the Veterans Housing Authority acknowledging receipt of the deed and scheduling a meeting to transfer the property into the care of local veterans. He smiled, feeling the gentle swell of relief and triumph, then placed the framed photo of his wife on the hood of his Impala and closed his eyes, imagining the veteran families who would soon call that home their own. Leilani approached, hugging him tightly, and whispered, "Thank you for showing me what real strength is." He patted her shoulder and said, "Now we begin again, together on new ground." As they walked side by side to the car, Joseph reflected on how a single truth, revealed at the right moment, could transform betrayal into redemption. And with the church bells tolling behind him, he knew that his carefully planned revenge had given way to genuine reconciliation and the promise of a future built on mutual respect and love.